Maria, Emilia, and Radhika, could you please just turn on your cameras as well and just give us a hello before we begin?
Hi, hello.
Good morning.
Morning.
Hi, good evening from UAE.
Good evening, Radhika. Thank you. Great. I think that we are all here, and the technology seems to be working and holding up. And I noticed that it is the top of the hour. So I'm going to go ahead and begin. I see that there's lots of wonderful names in the chat, people from all over the world joining us today, which is so exciting, really showing up for Generation Global and the wonderful work that we're doing in the world. So thank you so much for being here. Just a few practical points before we begin. We are in webinar mode. So you'll notice that you have two functions at the bottom of your screen. You have a Q&A function. This will be the place where when we get to moments to ask questions, to talk a little bit about some of the wonderful work we're going to hear today, you'll be able to post your questions there. And our moderators from the Generation Global team will be able to pull your questions, and that way we can go ahead and we can talk about them. So please, just reminder, Q&A will be for your questions. You are free to use the chat throughout this webinar, again, to introduce yourselves or to make comments, to give feedback about some of the things you're hearing. We encourage dialogue, obviously, so we want you to be engaged and involved. So just so you know, you can use the chat at the bottom of the screen as well for introductions or any kind of comments or side conversation you want to have through the webinar. So I feel that we are all ready and set to go. So just a few things, if we can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So before we begin, I'll introduce myself. My name is Lisa Petro. I am the Education and Quality Lead at Generation Global. And I have with me today two outstanding educators from different regions of the world. And they're going to be sharing with you some of their experience and their best practice for using dialogue and Generation Global in the classroom. So I have with me Maria Emilia Espejo from PrepaTec Eugenio Garza La Guerra in Mexico, and also Radhika Misra from our own English high school, Sharjah Boys in the United Arab Emirates. We go to the next slide, thanks. So let's just pause for a moment and think about, why are we all here today? Why are we all in this webinar together? Well, the answer to that is we are a community of practice. Whether you've been using dialogue and Generation Global resources in your classroom for years, or you're joining for the very first time, you are a part of a greater community. We together are a community of educators from all over the globe. Just looking at the chat today, I see people from India, the United States, Mexico, Ukraine, Italy, United Kingdom, Indonesia. We're from all over the world. We're from cities. We're from rural areas. We're from government and private institutions, organizations. We come from different beliefs, different backgrounds. But what we do share here in this space is caring. We have a deep caring for our learners, for our homes, and for the world. Over the past 12 years, we have been 15,000 plus educators strong. Educators who believe in the power of dialogue and communication as a tool to really help young people be more open-minded global citizens who are prepared to make a positive impact on the world. And in this webinar today, we've all come together to explore practical ways that we can use dialogue with our young people to find out what works and how to best use the Generation Global resources. So if we can go to the next slide, let's just begin by thinking a little bit about the why. Why dialogue? Why do we do this? Why do we bring dialogue to young people in our classrooms, in our learning communities? So in the spirit of teaching, we are going to just have a short interactive poll here so that we can learn more about you and why you use this practice with your young people. So if we can launch that poll, and we'll just ask the question. Great. What is most important for you as an educator in using dialogue and Generation Global in your learning communities? What is the most important thing? Looking at this list on the poll, can you choose one that most closely relates to why you use dialogue with your students? And if you're having a hard time with the poll, that's fine. You can write your comments in the chat. And if you're new to dialogue and you're joining us for the first time today, perhaps you can choose an option that interests you, that might prompt you or motivate you to use dialogue with your young people. So I'm just going to rely on our tech team to let me know when the poll is complete, when we've had a good amount of people who have been able to answer this poll. And then perhaps they can share the results. Great. So let's see, we have a diverse responses here. So we have about 24% of people that want to use dialogue for learning communication skills. We have people that use it for practicing language, some that use it to develop empathy and compassion for others, some that want to deepen understanding about topics and global issues through the stories of others. Our most predominant one is making intercultural connections with global peers to strengthen diversity. That's great. And then lastly, we have a few that want to promote peace and mutual respect between difference. Wonderful. So lots of great reasons to use dialogue. Thank you. So if we could just go on to the next slide, please. If we can just go to the next slide, please. Thank you so much. All right. So as you can see, there's many reasons to use dialogue. And for most educators, dialogue is a tool or an instructional strategy that helps young people develop knowledge, skills, and attitudes that create a long-lasting impact. So dialogue is not just a brief learning experience that students can just easily memorize and forget. It's something that's long-term. They carry it through life. It supports young people in being successful and effective in the world, in their work. At Generation Global, we work to provide educators and learners, specifically ages 13 to 17, with the tools and resources needed to develop and practice the skills of dialogue. It helps them to build intercultural competence, and it really results in young people being open-minded global citizens. So educators in our program use our resources to meet 3 global citizenship learning outcomes for their students. So the first one is being able to develop intercultural communication skills. The second is gaining knowledge of global topics and issues. These cover things like cultural sensitivity, self-awareness, multiple perspective taking. And then lastly, to make global connections with peers all over the world. This is relationship building, inter and intrapersonal skills. In this webinar series, we're going to explore these 3 learning outcomes and how 2 educators from different regions of the world use Generation Global resources to teach and practice the 5 core skills of dialogue that really help young people meet those 3 learning outcomes we just looked at. So you know these well if you're in the program, or if you're new to them, things like global communication, so sharing our personal stories, experiences, beliefs, or being able to challenge respectfully when we disagree, active listening, acknowledging, engaging with others, critical thinking, analyzing information, seeing multiple perspectives and diversity, questioning, constructing, and asking good questions that go deeper, and then of course, reflection. Reflection as thinking about, what have I learned from this intercultural experience? How can I continue to grow and develop from what I've learned? Great. So if we could just go to the next slide, please. So just very briefly, our agenda for today. First, we are going to hear from Maria Emilia Espejo. She's going to talk to us about using video conferencing in her social science classes to deepen students' understanding of global topics through the eyes and stories of young people from all over the world. After Maria Emilia has shared, we'll have a brief conversation where you're welcome to ask her questions and share your comments. Then we'll move on and we'll listen to Radhika Misra, who will share about using Generation Global in-class activities and video conferencing from our teaching resources to help young people build communication skills and learn and practice the English language. Similarly, we'll have a brief conversation after she shares. Then to end our time together, and in the spirit of dialogue and educational activities, we're going to have a reflection exercise that you can certainly take and use with your students as well, to really debrief what we learned and acknowledge one another for the wonderful work that's being done in this community of practice. So without further ado, if we can just move on to the next slide, please. Great. So I'm very excited to introduce to you Maria Emilia Espejo. Maria Emilia is from PrepaTec, Eugenio Garza Laguera in Mexico. She teaches in the Social Sciences and Humanities Department of PrepaTec Monterrey for more than 19 years, where she also collaborates as a national curriculum developer. She's a national teacher trainer for professors in the multicultural program, and PrepaTec Monterrey has recognized her commitment to developing opportunities that enrich the learning experience of students and for her outstanding student evaluations. She has a degree in international relations and a master's degree in administration of educational institutions. She's currently studying a PhD in philosophy oriented to communication and educational innovation. She's participated in several national and international congresses, presenting investigations derived from her professional experience and her doctoral thesis. Thank you, Maria Emilia, for being with us today. I turn the floor over to you.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you very much. And it's an honor for me to be here and to share my experience with Generation Global. I'm very excited. I'm really excited. And I want to say that I really like Generation Global. And we've been working with Generation Global since many years ago. And it's always a pleasure for me and, of course, for my students. And can we go to the first slide, please? Well, this is my name, and as Lisa already introduced me, I'm just gonna share with you today, or I'm gonna talk a little bit about what I'm gonna share today, which is how I use Generation Global in my class. And one of my favorites, or my students' favorite activities are, of course, video conference, because they have the opportunity to share with the students from other parts of the world what they think about their topic, given topic, and also to learn from students that are also their age. So the three more important aspects for me to use dialogue in my class are, first of all, to give the students the opportunity to practice and develop skills of interaction, empathy, and understanding, to develop critical thinking, questioning skills, and appreciation of different ways of thinking and cultures, and to prepare them to be efficient in the way they interact in a globalized world where they need to understand others in spheres, in many different spheres, for example, family, community, work, and any others. Can we move to the next slide, please? So what exactly do I do? How do I begin all these things? Well, at the very beginning of the semester, I try to prepare an atmosphere in where the students are going to be like, feeling safe to share what they think or what they believe or their own point of view among the class. And this is like the first step before we go to further into a video conference with other schools in the world. So I use activities suggested by Generation Global to create this safe space. I created these rules of our community. This slide is in Spanish because this is the one that I'm using with my students this semester. But I took these rules from the Essentials of Dialogue, that it's also a set of activities that are suggested by Generation Global. So at the beginning of the semester, I show them these rules. I always call my class as a community because that makes them feel like a part of, or a part of something that is not also like, a class, but it's a little community that we are in. So I go with them, I read them, I share them, and I always ask them if they want to modify or suggest any kind of changes in any of the rules that are right here. And in that way, they feel that they are also part of the rules that we are creating for our class. And it is also very interesting how they refer to these rules in some moments during the semester when someone is probably not being respectful to others, or when some people is talking and they cannot listen to other people. They also always refer to these rules that we have set for our community. Can we move to the next slide, please? So for this experience that I'm sharing with you, which is our participation in a video conference about the rights of girls and women, I use several resources suggested by Generation Global, and they all can be found in the platform and have very specific details on how to use them. These resources also suggest videos and materials that are presented and prepared by experts. And that is also another thing that I really like about Generation Global, because they already have done a very important part of what we teachers need to do sometimes in order to find like adequate resources for our classroom. So I will go and explain a little more about these activities that I use. And I just want to refer here about the objectives for my class for this very specific video conference, which was, I have two main objectives, which were to build respectful intercultural relationship, as well as sustainable and viable solutions to global complex and interconnected issues, and to participate in the construction of a democratic and respectful society of human rights from an ethical position based on knowledge of social phenomena. These two objectives are part of my school curriculum. So I took them, and these are the ones that I was trying to develop during the activity that I'm sharing with you. Can we go forward, please? So the process that I take to incorporate these or any video conference in my class is very simple. At the beginning of the semester, I go through the different video conference that Generation has already in its webpage, and look for the ones that matches to the schedule of my class, and then decide which topic I will use. Well, I'm very lucky because I can relate most of the topics into the classes that I teach. And further than that, the sole experience of the activity and the video conference, it's excellent to develop competencies that are beyond any specific content. So once I have decided which video conference or in what video conference we're going to participate, I go and look for the different activities that Generation Global has for that specific content. And I prepare the sequence and the material in the class, and that's it. I am ready to start working with my students. Can we go to the next slide, please? So here I have some pictures of my students working in this specific activities. So the first thing that I've done in this case, well, I told my students in what video conference we were going to participate. And also I told them with what schools or the country from where these schools were from. I mean, they get really, really excited when they know they are going to talk to students that are from places that are far away from Mexico. And in this specific case, we have this video conference with students from India and United States. So for them, this experience was really, really enriching, because sometimes this is, like the first time they're going to speak with people that are very far away from Mexico. So after that, I asked them to watch. I mean, this is one of the suggestions of Generation Global, and I try to go from a general topic to the specific life of my students, and I'm gonna explain a little bit more about that. So the first thing that I ask them is to watch a video individually, videos that are suggested also by Generation Global about rights of girls and women. And once they have done that, they work in small groups and share the information they saw in the video. With this information that they already shared, they create a poster summarizing the information and to make others aware of the inequality or the gender inequality. Can we go to the next slide? In this specific case, I have two different groups. Ones were working inside the classroom, that were the students that were there. And I also have a small group of students working remotely. So I have to manage these two students at the same time. So some of them use whiteboards to do the poster, and some others use like apps or web pages to do the posters. And it's really interesting how they were able to manage to put all this information from many different videos speaking about gender inequality in different places of the world, and this kind of images that also were there for others to come and see when they change from one classroom to other. Can we go to the next slide, please? So once we saw cases from around the world, I shared with them some specific statistics about Mexico. So we review a little bit of information of how is gender inequality here in Mexico and how different is, for example, in the way we earn money, or in the kind of spaces that we go, or the different spaces that women and men are able to go or are commonly find in Mexico. And then I asked them again in small groups to fill a chart about advantages and disadvantages of being a woman in Mexico. And I gave them at this specific moment a time to reflect on their own lives and their own experience. And for this activity, I tried to put girls and boys in the same team, so they can hear from one another, like the different experience they have had. And for me, it was also very important to speak about advantages and disadvantages of being a woman, because, I mean, yes, there are a lot of gender inequality, but there are also like interesting things that we can hear from men or from women to say that, well, probably men are less allowed to share emotions and women can share a little bit easier, and etc. So it's kind of interesting. And I think this builds empathy between students. So after we have all this knowledge, we participate in the video conference, and they felt, as I said, they told me later, I mean, these kind of activities make them be aware and prepare for the video conference and to share with our students around the world, what was going on in their lives and in the country, because they have the time to think of all this before the video conference. And then, well, the students wrote as a closer, students wrote how they felt this experience went. And I asked them some very specific questions about how they felt they developed empathy, or what were the things that they think were the most valuable for the video conference. Can we go to the next slide, please? So here are some of the, I know it's a lot of text, but I'm just gonna go through some of these ideas very, very fast. I put in black the comment of my student in Spanish, because at this moment we are having our classes in Spanish, and in English I translated in colors, and I try to highlight in purple the ideas that I think are most valuable for each of these activities. For example, one of my students said, "It helped me to face my fears of speaking with people from all over the world." And another student said, "Well, it strongly motivated me to be empathic." And that's very important for me. Building empathy for me, it's very important, because that's the way we can build bond. We can relate to others. He also expresses that it is valid. The different information or opinions were valid even when I do not agree or do not think they're the same way. And it was really interesting in this specific video conference, because some of my students didn't agree with the opinion of someone else's, and they were very respectful by sharing why they didn't agree with it. I think that that's one of the most important things to learn with this kind of video conferences. And well, here we have another one. I feel prepared to dialogue with people from a different culture than mine, from India or the United States, because now I know a little more about how things work in their country. They helped me to develop dialogue and respect. Even if they didn't agree, they didn't interrupt. And this is very important. I learned to respect all opinions and listen before speaking. Can we go to the next one, please? So here are some other ideas that I think are very valuable. The activities helped me to be more aware of the information on current situations surrounding the subject, which is also very important because it's part of my class. The name of my class is Mexico in the Global Agenda. So it's as I said at the beginning, I'm very lucky because a lot of this content can be easily related to the class that I teach. And here's another idea that I think it's also very important in this conference: being in a safe environment with a moderator helped me to express my opinion and represent my cultures and gives me the confidence to express myself. And this is a plus that Generation Global has that I really like, that the video conferences are always moderated by experts. So with the teacher, I just like behind the scene, looking how our students interact, and always there is a moderator that helps them to develop ideas or to give the word to different students and etc. So I really like that. And well, finally, seeing my mates discussing the subject in a cordial manner and listening to the different points of view from students of other countries helped me to better understand other people who live different than me. So when I receive this kind of input from my students, I go and I'm more in love with this program because it gives the students what I want them to experience. So I think it's super valuable. Can we go to the next one, please? So some things that I saw during the activity, well, for example, the skills that I saw that they develop, of course, global communications. And I'm not going to go into this because I already told what the students said already, but it is very interesting how, for example, they use the information or the things that we would do that I heard they were rehearsing, or not rehearsing, but analyzing the information they were analyzing before the video conference, in the video conference, and how respectful they were when sharing their ideas and whatever they reflected before. Of course, they develop active listening by paying attention what others were saying, commenting, asking questions, and etc. Critical thinking, because the students were able to reflect and understand why the point of view on a topic might be different. Establishing relationships between the context of people and the way we build or construct our own opinions. And that's also very important to learn, especially when they are that age. And well, of course, reflection, because they were able to reflect on their own lives and share their experiences and to understand others. So I don't want to go further, but this is kind of the activity that I did. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Maria Emilia. That was incredible. And I just have to say, acknowledge you for the depth that you've gone into, the way you were able to really connect your social science class and the topic on the rights of girls and women with what you were doing in your curriculum, and then take advantage of those resources to give students lots of diverse experiences, not only the video conferencing with students in India, but also in terms of the activities to prepare them for really thinking deeply about that topic. So wonderful, wonderful work. I see a lot of chats and comments in the chat, just also acknowledging you for that great work. And we did have a couple of questions come through. So I'm gonna just pick two. And I think the first one that is really quite interesting and perhaps maybe many educators face, Divya has asked, how do you make the students feel empowered and confident to face children from different parts of the world? Maybe you could talk a little bit about how you motivate your students to participate.
Well, actually, I mean, that's a very important question because, I mean, that's a challenge, of course. And at this particular video conference, most of my students were there in the classroom. They were using their headphones, but we were there all in the same place. So I try to encourage them by saying like, come on guys, who wants to speak now? Or who wants to go next? Or just think about what we have done before, or what kind of experiences can you share? You know, like just remember what we did before. Most of the time it's very difficult for the first probably 2 or 3 people to start, but once they just go, I mean, it's like popcorn. They start, I mean, they all want to talk. So it's very interesting, but I try to give them like a lot of confidence with the preparation, and then, you know, like remembering them that we have done it, we have reflected on this, just share what you have learned.
Great, thank you. Another really important question, Daniela asks, how many students do you have in your class? And did the live video conference take place during your subject's time schedule? So can you talk a little bit about the class size and how do you really fit that into your daily teaching? Thanks.
Yes, I have around 30 students in my class. Actually, for this video conference, we were kind of a lot. We were 3 schools and some other students that sign up by themselves. So my class actually fit to the schedule of this video conference with a little, I mean, I have to manage the time a little bit because the video conference started at 12 p.m. and my classes start at 12:05. So I have to beg my students to be on time. But actually, most of them were on time. Some of them just ran because they have to change from one class to another. But I mean, we were able to manage at this time. So that's why I think it's very important to go and check the schedules before the topic. And I can say that because, as I said already, I mean, most of the topics can fit in one way or another. But I think, I mean, even if the subject is not exactly what I need in my class as content, the sole experience of having this video conference and developing some kind of soft skills is very important for me and my school. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And then one other question I think is really interesting, and maybe you can just talk a little bit about how you use dialogue to address this. So Meta asks, while students research on some of these sensitive issues, how do you keep them away from developing prejudice for a gender or a region? How would you use dialogue to do that?
Well, that's a fair question. I think sometimes when we speak, we don't even notice that we are judging or we are saying things that probably are not correct in some scenarios. So while we are in the class, I try to make them think of that. For example, is that your own opinion? And always speak, using I. That's very important because they don't represent anyone in Mexico. They only represent themselves. And this is very Generation Global. They're using the I to express our thoughts or our feelings or our beliefs, because it's just a personal point of view. And I try to contextualize. For example, we are going to speak with this country, or we know a little bit about the country, and we can research if we feel that for this particular video conference, they already have classes and they went through different issues around the world. So they do have some kind of knowledge of the situation of the different countries. So, but just pointing out, like, probably this is a judgment. Can you just say that in a different way, or be more respectful when you say this or that? And that happens not because we speak to other countries. It happens because that's probably the way we commonly speak. And just pointing out that in the class every day, I think that's just a preparation. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria Emilia. Wonderful answer. Thank you. Okay, we will move on now. Thank you so much for your questions. And we realize we have lots of great questions. So we will definitely keep the conversation going in the chat. But now I would like to introduce our next speaker and brilliant educator. So here we have Radhika Misra from our own English high school, Sharjah Boys in the United Arab Emirates. Radhika is an English teacher at our own high school, English high school, Sharjah Boys. Besides being a recipient of the GEMS Best Teacher Award in 2018-2019, Miss Radhika was also appreciated with a certificate by the Consulate General of India, Dubai, for her exemplary contribution in imparting quality education to students. She's been leading the Generation Global program of her school for over 5 years. And during these years, her pupils have had the opportunity to participate in several video conferences that promote healthy dialogues on issues relevant to global citizenship. Ms. Radhika believes that constructive conversations are at the heart of human connections. She's delighted to have connected with the Generation Global program, which provides her with access to modules that can help rekindle the flame of peaceful discourse and coexistence, which the world desperately needs today. Thank you, Radhika. I turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Lisa. Hello, everybody. This is Radhika here, and I'm from UAE, as you can see. And our school has been, we have been connected with Generation Global right from the year 2017. And I remember the first day when I was sent to the Generation Global program as an introduction. I went to this meeting and I really loved the whole focus of the program. And I thought, yes, this needs to be something that needs to be carried out in my school too. And therefore we started with this. And I think now we have already had VCs with approximately more than 10 countries, different parts of the world, and students are very excited to be a part of this VCs. They basically join Generation Global to, they look forward to the VCs basically. And now just last year, we turned ourselves into a Generation Global Club. So we have a club in our school, the Generation Global Club, and every month we have at least 2 meetings in which I try to give them topics through which they can explore the world. So that is in a nutshell what we do in Generation Global Club. Can you move to the next slide, please? Yeah, so my students' age, I start with grade 8s, basically from 13 to 17 years, so 8 to 12, the grades that they fall into, the classes. And basically from grade 8 students, I don't give them the topics which is difficult for them. So what we basically do is an in-house training, which just slowly release them into those major themes, because they are not ready to learn the deep level of conversation. So just small things. For example, I give them topics like to explore about a country. So students get into pairs and they explore about different countries. They get to know, okay, this particular country has got this kind of custom. So they get to know the people better. So this is the way I start with grade 8s. Then we move to grade 9s. They become a little bit mature. I open them slowly towards the video conferences. So they get to know different people. They get to meet different people online. And this dialogue, basically why I use dialogue in my classroom, I feel that more they converse, the more they talk to each other, it creates a harmony, it creates awareness, and they also get a free and fair environment where they can express their feelings. Next slide, please. What is dialogue? Dialogue is a conversation that fosters discussion. Initially, when the students joined Generation Global program, and they got to know that Generation Global provides this platform for students to have international conversations, they basically came thinking that it is like a debate, they have to win. But slowly after going through all those modules of Generation Global, they got to know it's not about winning. In dialogue, there is no winner in dialogue. Both the people have their own perspectives, and we need to understand and listen to each other so that we become better people, better human beings. They for compromises, they agree to differ. So in the conversation, in-house conversations and online conversations, both we see students who very smilingly disagree to what the other person has said. So there is no conflict happening, but they try to understand each other's perspectives. It opens their mind. And for me, I just observe the whole thing. I give them something to research upon. They come back. And then my job is just to provide them that atmosphere where they can speak freely. My role is basically that of a facilitator, to understand what they are trying to say. And sometimes, yes, as I was hearing to Maria, and she was also talking about the same thing, that sometimes we also get into that judgment situation where we try to judge what the other person is saying. But I think Generation Global has opened my eyes also. Now my eyes and ears are quite open. I try to understand the other person's perspective, and then I move on. Next slide, please. So these are the resources that I have used from Generation Global. And I choose it according to the classes, the classroom, the students, and taking everything into account. So here, wealth, charity, and poverty. This, when we had this, children got to know, they learned a lot about how to be empathetic, how important it is to have empathy. We had rights of women and girls. Through this topic, initially when the students came to the classroom, they felt that all the genders are all equal. That was their mindset. But after I showed them the video, I had a discussion with the help of Generation Global videos and resources. When I showed them, they got to know that this is a real picture. This is what is happening. Because for them, we have many female teachers in our school. So they thought that the women are already empowered. That was their notion. But then I slowly link it to the SDG goals. And I tell them, like, these are the 17 SDG goals. And how is this first goal connected to the second? How is the second connected to the third? So slowly we move on. So they get to know, like, yeah, without one SDG goal being fulfilled, it's impossible to get the other one. So it opens a broader perspective. And then again, power of narrative. When I use this particular resource from GG, what happened is that students, they used to come with one mindset, but then I tell them, like, just give them examples. Like if a small child is told that the sun rises in the west, the child will believe because that is the only narrative that he has heard. And slowly I move on to say that it's necessary to have two viewpoints on the same subject, because you never know who is right and who is wrong. It's just a matter of perspectives. This has the whole modules and all the classes, definitely they have made them into better human beings, and they have come up with their own individual perspectives. We also got to know that the problems in the world basically happen because of fake news and social media. And through these resources of Generation Global, they can easily find out which is a fake media, which is the one which is true, or what is actually happening. So I ask them to take that, put it somewhere on a Google bar, ask them, give them the address and tell them, okay, now you search, Google it out and see if this is a fake news, when did this first appear, and all this stuff. So it becomes easy for them to know. So before they spread a message, they first check if it is right or not. And course objectives, I give them, as I said, I give them YouTube links and just ask them to watch the videos and come to the class and explain what they understood, and slowly I'll link it to my classroom. Towards the end of the session, I'll be sharing one of my lesson plans in which I have used GG resources, and I think that will be easy for everyone to understand. Next slide, please. Yeah, this is a lesson plan I'll be sharing with you all. This is a CBSE grade 12 lesson plan on Jennifer's Tigers by Adrian Rich. This is a poetry. In this particular lesson, they talk about the feminism factor, where a woman is actually very depressed because of the kind of life she's living. So what I do is that I link this with the Generation Global resources. So what I do, I first talk to them about gender discrimination. I ask them what it is, does it exist in the society, and what contributes to this in the class. I show them the images of a tiger in a cage and tell them how is it equal to the women in the society. Then they try to bring in those connections, and slowly I show them videos on, ask them to check videos on this Operation of Women by Cheryl Boudin. This is a Generation Global resource. And then I ask them, do you actually think the women are oppressed? Are they an oppressed gender? And come to this, how is a tiger in a cage and a woman equal? How do you compare? So these are new things that they learn, and they really get interested because we are going beyond the text. Then we talk about Malala Yousafzai. Why did she win Nobel Peace Prize? What was the reason? What was the problems that she was facing? And all these things. Then the next question that comes to them is, do you think gender discrimination exists in developed countries like USA? Now, this is something that it's difficult for them to realize that in countries like USA also, there could be gender discrimination. So when they get to know, they start researching. And then, please, next slide, please. Okay. The impact, these lessons, the impact that they have is the image of gender equality was entirely different. That's what the students told me, that first, after the VCs, the first thing that they learned, that they didn't think that the gender discrimination really existed. Now it is already over, everything is over. They thought it's only in certain parts of India that it existed, but they got to know, like after the VCs, they got to know that it still exists in different parts of the world. And we have had several responses from my students. One student says, I like the fact that VC started by giving an outline of what is meant by women's rights, and then progressing on to how individualism plays a large role in understanding the story. We got to know that to eradicate gender differences is necessary for a male also to take part. It's not necessary that we should only carry on the flag of feminism and move around. And then we had a very good VC with Indonesia and Ukraine also. And with these countries, when they got to know, they knew that this is not related to countries. It's actually spread all over the world. This kind of concepts are there everywhere. Next slide, please. The dialogue skills improved. They help my students to be more tolerant. They have become good listeners. They started respecting each other's opinions. And the most important thing is that instead of using we, they are using I. They are using I. They got to know that they're not working as a community. There is an individual beliefs and individual thoughts that changes everything. So they started using the I perspective, and they are accepting differences happily. So this is a picture of my students appearing for the Generation Global VC. You can see. I think most of my points were covered by Maria, so I didn't have much to speak on.
No, thank you, Radhika. That was incredible. I mean, I think one of the most, there was a lot of powerful things, but two things really stood out for me. I think the first thing is you do so well at making these connections to the sustainable development goals. And you've really been able to illustrate how you can take these different topics and make them relevant for young people. And I know you mentioned, using the ultimate dialogue adventure to identify those topics, but you also create a space where students can make those personal connections. And I think that was the second thing I heard you say that really made me go, wow, like you talked about as the teacher, you're just the facilitator. It's all about what your students have to say and helping them get out what they need to say. And that is really the essence of learning. So I really acknowledge like what you're doing there in terms of creating that space for young people to have a voice around these pressing issues that they're inheriting, that they're really inheriting in their generation. So really powerful, really powerful. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
We also had some great comments as well in the chat. Just amazing. Teachers are very excited. And a few questions, if you wouldn't mind, we'll just take a second. Just a couple questions. So one of the things that I was wondering if you could talk about, what are some tips that you have for balancing the time to engage students in the Generation Global resources and for your regular instruction in the current curriculum that you have? What are some tips you have for that? Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Lisa, for that question. Curriculum, when it comes to curriculum, I embed that in the lesson plans. I do it. I bring all those, most of the resources which can be used, I use it in the English classrooms. But otherwise, for a club, we have this after school meetings on Zoom. So basically, we do it there. So 1 hour meeting, 2 days a month, 2 days. And then we discuss all this thing. I give them the extra knowledge, whatever, and extra work. They come with PPTs, they make their own PPTs and they show it, whatever they have discussed. And that way, even I get to learn a lot of things because most of the time I don't get to see a lot of things. And I get enriched every time after the meeting.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. We have another question for you from Tatiana. So they ask, do you usually have online or offline Generation Global Club meetings? Do you have a kind of Generation Global mock conference with your students? So maybe you can talk a little bit about online and offline use of the program, and then if you're doing any kind of preparations there. Thank you.
Pre-pandemic, yes, we did have offline practices. And now after this COVID has come in, we do practice online also, but now the students are so used to Zoom conferences, you don't need to have that much of practice with them. But basically, when we have a club meeting, we go in that same format like the Generation Global BC goes. So it becomes practically easy for them to get into that same mode. And also we had conferences in Hindi and Arabic as well.
Excellent. And I think that's an important thing to mention as well, that there is the capability of having video conferences in a variety of languages. So thank you. One more question for you. We had someone ask about, what do you do if you have a fixed curriculum or you have certain subjects or topics that you're not allowed to teach about? How can you give some tips? Do you have to change the curriculum to include dialogue?
No, we can't change the curriculum, but yes, we can filter the Generation Global resources and use it in the curriculum, because that's what I'm doing. I'm filtering the resources. And I think it's just important to give them that small way, to show them the way, and then they will automatically go to the place where what is actually needed. So I just pave the way for them. That's it.
Thank you. That's great. And I think one last question, Trina asks, how can you encourage more students to get involved with Generation Global and the Generation Global Club?
That's a nice question. Basically, I think the main thing that that draws their attention towards the club is the VC. They look forward to having conferences with different students because they go back home and tell their parents that, like, I have had a VC with Ukraine, the school in Ukraine, with Indonesia, with Malaysia, or whatever. They like it. So I think that is the main thing. So I bring them, I motivate them, like, you want to be a part of the VC? Okay, this is, and now after the UDA program, it has become more easy because we get certificates. The students get certificates. So they are really motivated. It's like a cheese and they come to eat that and they just be a part of this club.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you so much, Radhika. This was amazing. I have to say, really amazing. And as you mentioned, the lesson plan that you have, we're going to share that with teachers. So we will give you these resources afterwards so that you too can teach some of these exemplary opportunities to your students as well. So with that said, we'll just move on into our reflection period of the webinar to support you in really thinking about what you've gained from listening to these two brilliant educators and their experiences. So what I'd like to ask you to do first, we're going to do just a three-part reflection. First, I'd like you to think about what have you learned? So what is one thing you learned today by listening to these two educators? Feel free to type it in the chat if you like, or you can also just make a note for yourself on a piece of paper if you're taking notes somewhere. But what is one thing you learned today? So we've got some great stuff coming up in the chat. How to support students to do dialogue. Absolutely. I think we've gotten a lot of great tips about that. What else have you gained from today? I think I've also learned a little bit about how to connect sustainable development goals and also how to prepare a safe space from Maria Emilia. Learn how to motivate students, to encourage them, how to use the program. That's great. Please, we invite you, if you're not using it, please join us, register on the platform. We'd love to hear about your stories. How to be inspired, how to keep active, step by step on how to integrate the program, how to prepare to get ready for video conferences more effectively, how to develop SDG knowledge and incorporate it in the classroom. These are wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing this. How to build respect. That's wonderful. Inspiring ideas. Absolutely. Both Radhika and Maria Emilia, you both had very inspiring ideas. This is great. Thank you. Okay, I see them pouring in. So now that we've got our brains working on the learning, let's just go to the next step. And now I'd like you to consider how you can take action on that learning. How can you act on what you've learned? This is an important part of reflection. Often when we work with students, we think of reflection as just thinking or recalling, but here we want to act on it. So you have this poll, and in this poll, I'd like you to please choose the response that most suits your next step based on what you've learned today. So what is one action you will take as a result of today's webinar? So maybe you'll share a best practice tip of your own on social media using our hashtag #GenerationGlobal. Maybe you'll try one of these with your learners, the best practices you've learned today. Maybe if you're new, you'll create an account on the teacher portal. Please, it's free, it's easy, join us. Or maybe you register your learners for the Ultimate Dialogue Adventure where you can access those topics. Or if you get into the teacher portal, you can book your own video conference. So please, I'm sure that we've got so many people here from all over the world. It'd be great if you could get your students talking with one another. Ooh, we've got some in the chat too. Initiate a Gen G club. That's great. Motivate students to learn how to dialogue. Excellent. Very good. Okay, so if we want to close that poll, perhaps. And result, excellent. So it looks like the majority of you are going to go away and use one of these best practices. Perfect, that's awesome. And we've got people that'll share on social media. that will plan and implement, book video conferences, register their learners for the Ultimate Dialogue Adventure, please do, and create an account on the teacher portal. Excellent. I am so glad to see that this has motivated you to take action. Okay, I think we are at the end of our time, but what I would love to do is invite you to please share with us your best practices. You can email us. If we can go to the next slide, please, with our contact info. You can email us at our help desk or our support center and let us know what you're doing. Please share with us your best practice, your work. You can certainly post about it on social media. Find us on Twitter at @gen_global_. And of course, please register on our teacher portal. Stay connected with us. Use the resources. With that, I think we are at time. Thank you so much. Again, a big, big thank you to Radhika, Misra, and Emilia Espejo for sharing your work, your journey with dialogue, and everyone who's attended and who is in our community of practice, spreading peace and encouraging students to be open-minded global citizens. Thank you so much. Be well, and till next time.